Chapter 1, March 29th, 2019. Today, I Die. Part 1. On the morning of Norman's Stark night, I just wasn't in the mood to entertain something fake, or wear a mask pretending nothing was wrong, especially now that I knew that Kay and I were filler friends. I was desperately hoping tonight would get cancelled. I couldn't get over the fact that I had opened my heart to Norman, only to discover how he'd been using me as his backdrop. He'd said we were his family, and all this time he'd been lying. I wasn't in the right headspace to meditate, but I'd promised Kay that I would try one last time. This would be the 5th time in my life I'd given up on myself on all 4 previous attempts. As I laid down on Kay's bed with my eyes closed, I tried to start my breath work, but nothing was working. I began to get so frustrated with myself. I couldn't get Norman out of my head. I kept playing imaginative scenarios over and over again about what I would say to him. I even had responses to his bullshit answers. Like before, I gave up pretty much before I even started. Frustrated, I got up and began to walk down the hallway towards the kitchen to make myself a coffee and check my emails. Not before I killed a spider on the carpet. I've been afraid of spiders for over 40 years, and this one was no different. But I remembered I hated checking my emails. The thought of just opening them filled me with dread. I regularly half-closed my eyes while giving the new emails a quick scan, hoping that nothing terrifying was there. I was so fucking disappointed with myself for giving up so quickly. I walked into the bathroom and stood directly in front of the mirror, hoping to confront myself. And even that I couldn't do. I didn't want to see my reflection staring back at me with disappointment in my eyes for giving up. Fuck, what is wrong with me? For fuck's sake, Cornelius, come on! I kept shouting at myself while banging and slapping my hands against my head and face. I want to die. I don't want to live anymore. I slumped to the floor, leaning back against the vanity cabinet, crying into my hands. I was in so much pain. I curled up on the floor, wanting it to be all over. After about 15 minutes of crying until nothing was left in me, I managed to pull myself off the floor and walk back towards the kitchen. But the voice in my head continued giving me hateful messages. I desperately needed it to stop. As I walked past the refrigerator, my inner voice convinced me to smash my head against the refrigerator door until the pain and negative chatter stopped. I stood there, facing the door and holding onto the sides. I took a big, deep breath, closed my eyes, and leaned my head back. All of a sudden, I heard Zelda and Link simultaneously meowing loudly. I opened my eyes to find them sitting in front of the refrigerator. I thought, I can't do this, not in front of my little fur babies. So I picked them both up and placed them into their catio, something Kay had designed and built. It was their own secure, private outdoor space. We lived on such a busy road where so many cats had been killed that we both decided Zelda and Link would be house cats. The thought of them being outside was terrifying to us. Then I walked back to the refrigerator, placed both hands in the same spot, closed my eyes, leaned back and... Fuck me! They were both sitting in front of the fridge again, meowing simultaneously. I looked down at them and said, "You know what? Since you're not going to let me do this, what do you want from me?" Zelda raced down the hallway and started meowing outside Kay's bedroom. I glanced towards her in disbelief, thinking, what the fuck? You want me to meditate? Now I've seen it all. So I walked back towards Kay's room. Zelda jumped on the bed, motioning her head downwards like she was telling me to lay down. So I restarted my breathing exercises. I was so impatient, I just made them up on the spot. During my breathing exercises, I slowly started to focus on what my last day on Earth would look like. I would spend it with Kay, Zelda, and Link. I would wake up super early, make Kay breakfast in bed, followed by a long hot shower together, and then back to bed for some us time. Afterwards, I would walk across the road to the supermarket and pick up our happy food. Our happy food was a cooked roast chicken, coleslaw, carrot and kumara mash, soft white rolls and chocolate eclairs. Afterwards, we'd place the little ones in a secure cat carrier and drive to our favourite location, which was a stunning secluded beach about 2 hours away on the other side of Auckland. Once there, we'd play cards while listening to Calvin Harris, Rihanna, Miley Cyrus and Taylor Swift. It was the simplest of days, and over the last 8 years, these days were the ones I cherished the most. While I was focusing on my last day, I noticed that the negative chatter in my head wasn't as prominent, and I felt that I was meditating. I had no distractions or competing thoughts. So, I started to focus on my funeral. What would that look like? What songs would Kay play? I can't quite explain this surreal experience, but I would never be able to do it justice with words alone. I didn't just imagine my funeral, I was watching it as if I was there. I was watching my funeral from the balcony of the church. I saw everyone who turned up to show their support. There weren't many people in attendance, but I watched some of the players from my over-35 football team, past and present, turn up. I wasn't sure if they were here for me or they were here to support Kay. Kay looked heartbroken. She was in total shock that her husband was gone. I started to cry, and I could feel the tears trickle down the side of my face. In my present observer state, which I will call the now, I was very conscious of my surroundings, and I was starting to get cold. I grabbed the duvet and placed it on top of me to keep warm. I knew that Zelda and Link had joined me on the bed. I could feel them moving around, trying to snuggle next to me. But for some reason, this didn't break whatever state I was in. Still observing my funeral, I sat at the back of the church and watched as Kay stood up, fighting back the tears while she thanked everyone for showing up. MJ stood next to her daughter, holding her hand and comforting her while Kay made her speech. 8 years ago, I was feeling very lonely and sad. I wrote down 10 attributes that I wanted in a person, and I asked the universe to guide me to this person. And they sent me my beautiful, amazing husband, Cornelius. He was my everything. He was my everybody, my best friend, husband, and soulmate. These were my 10 attributes, and this was my husband. I asked for someone to love me, including all my flaws. Cornelius never saw one flaw in me, even though they were there. He just saw me. I asked for someone funny. Cornelius was one of the most hilarious, dry, humorous, sarcastic people you could ever meet. Cornelius had such a surreal sense of humor, and there wasn't a day that went by without having full-on belly laughs. He always knew how to make me laugh, no matter how sad he was feeling. I asked for someone kind. Cornelius was the kindest person you could ever meet. He always put himself second, without fail, as long as you came first. He went out of his way all the time to help anyone who needed it. I asked for someone sensitive. Cornelius always knew when I needed him, even without asking. When I wasn't feeling well, my husband was my warm blanket on those cold nights. I asked for someone athletic. Cornelius lived for football. He would have been so happy to know that his football team are here wearing their shirts in support of their ex-manager and teammate. Cornelius loved Liverpool more than anything on this planet. My husband always joked that Liverpool only came second when it came to me. I never once believed him. Liverpool was his everything, and it breaks my heart that Cornelius never got the chance to see his beloved team lift the Premier League trophy. 29 years I've been waiting for that moment. I asked for someone who could cook. Cornelius was a fantastic chef. He put his heart and soul into everything so that we could have something yummy to eat. He could never prepare for just the two of us, though. Cornelius always made something for about 6 people. Kay smiled at that sentence. Kay was right. I had no idea how to cook for just 2 people. I asked for someone who loves animals. Cornelius was an amazing father to our firstborn, Zelda, and his beautiful son, Link. I asked for someone who was family-orientated. Cornelius wanted to be a dad more than anything, but sadly, he never got the chance to right the wrongs of his childhood. His love for his mum, Doris, was something so special, and his love for my mum was just something else. He was there for my mum when her 2 sons were not. I asked for someone who was committed. Cornelius was committed to our marriage every day and provided for his family. Even when he took hit after hit, my husband got back up and provided over and over again. I did. I put everything I had into my marriage. I asked for someone loyal. Cornelius was so faithful, even with my condition, when I know other people would have either strayed or left. Which was so true. Countless times I was advised to have an affair. I asked for someone ambitious. If you looked up this word in the dictionary, my husband's name would be right there. Cornelius tried to make so many changes to better everyone's day-to-day life. Sadly, they kept slamming the door on him, when I know he would have made a massive difference, especially in this city, never mind the world. I asked for someone tall. I don't know anyone who stood taller than my husband. Cornelius was a giant, even at 5'6". No matter how hard the cards of life dealt him, he found a way to get back on his feet and try again. I listened so closely to Kay's eulogy. Her words were so touching. It was bizarre to hear them read out loud and how she compared me to her list to the universe. It made me incredibly sad that I made her go through this ordeal. Reading her list was the toughest thing she has ever done. Kay has never told anyone about her wish list. All I wanted to do was to give her one last hug and tell her that I was coming home. I was utterly zoned out. I wasn't sure how long I had been fixating on my funeral. Well, if I saw my last full day on Earth and my funeral, I might see how I die, still in this unique state. I focused purely on that day. I was lying in bed with Kay, but this time I was in my bedroom. I was wearing my beautiful baby blue wedding shirt, my grey, silver and gold waistcoat, and my black jeans. I was wearing all my wedding rings, including the engagement wrist cuff that Kay bought for me the day after she proposed to me on the bridge in Amsterdam. I was also wearing my mum's watch. Lying on my chest was Chenzo, Pani, Coco, and Fosty Bear. Kay and I called those our original babies. Chenzo was a little beanie pup. I've loved him for over 24 years. He came everywhere with me, including all of my adventures with Mum. Chenzo watched every Liverpool game with me. No matter what time or place, he was always there. Pani was this beautiful, golden woolly bear who wore a black bow around his neck. But during the night, somehow, he always managed to take it off. He loved being naked, and I bought him for Kay. Coco is a small, ginger, cheeky beanie monkey. I went to buy petrol one day and saw her sitting alone on this shelf where you pay for your petrol next to the chocolates. She looked so frigging cute. I walked out the main door towards my car, only to find myself walking back into the petrol station to rescue her and bring her back home. Mum also had a beanie bear. He was Chenzo's brother, a small, little brown bear with ears the size of Dumbo's. Mum had him for 23 years, and he always slept next to her. When I went to see Mum in the hospital just before she passed away, my sister had brought her a more significant, brand new white dog, and her little friend was left at home on the table like he was a piece of trash. So, Kay and I decided to adopt him, and he became our Fosty Bear. Zelda and Link were also snuggling up to us, but they were not asleep. They just knew today was my last. Kay wasn't wearing anything apart from a pair of my boxer shorts, holding me so close and so tight to her body, like she didn't want to let me go, not even for a second. Kay was stroking my face slowly and deliberately with her right hand. My eyes were closed. Finally, I looked at peace. I could just make out that I was shallow breathing. I knew I didn't have long to go, and I wasn't fighting it either. I was embracing it because it had been a long time coming. Watching myself die slowly in the arms of my wife felt more real than life itself. I couldn't quite put my finger on this experience. It felt as if I was really there, watching myself die. I could easily walk around my bedroom and observe me from any perspective. I could pick up and hold any one of my 30 diesel watches. My watch collection meant so much to me and who I was. The first thing I would put on when getting ready for work was one of my watches, and then I dressed accordingly. And as I was looking at my watches, I kept wondering, what is the point of having all these watches? I could only wear one at a time. Who was I trying to impress, me or the world? I opened up my wardrobe closet and looked at all my diesel clothes. I must have spent thousands and thousands on this brand. I loved everything about this brand and what it stood for. I was this brand. I lived and breathed this brand. Then I had a strange thought. Why? I turned around to face the version of myself dying. I knew I only had a few minutes left. I stood at the foot of the bed, repeatedly asking myself, how the fuck did I get here? I could not take my eyes off of myself. Why did I decide to take my own life? It never once crossed my mind to even think about a situation like this. Yet here I was, watching myself die. Was I born into this world suicidal, depressed, and lonely? Was my decision always inevitable? Or did this just happen to me slowly throughout my life without me even knowing? Then I heard a voice, as clear as if you were standing right next to me. Look how peaceful you seem. This is the inner peace you have always been searching for. You will never have to feel any more pain or suffering ever again. I turned around, but no one was behind me, just my reflection in the mirror. So I turned back around and carried on watching myself die. Kay was sobbing her heart out uncontrollably. I have never heard anyone cry like this before. I was witnessing the start of my wife grieving as I was dying in her arms. She whispered in my ear, I love you so much. I love you so much, my beautiful husband. I don't know what I will do without you. You're my everything. I watched the dying version of myself struggle to open my eyes fully and look up at Kay. Tears were rolling down my face. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I love you so much. I've had the best 8 years of my life. You're the only one who showed me genuine kindness, and I got to experience the purest love ever, something that not many people will ever experience in their lifetime. I love you, my little chicken, so, so much. And thank you for letting me be me. I know I haven't been the easiest person to live with, and you have not once ever judged me. But I have to go. I can't live with this pain and suffering anymore. Kay had loved me regardless of all my mental health issues. This was true love, and she was my sole partner. Again, I heard the same voice. This is what you have always wanted, and now you're so close to inner peace. Kay will be okay, so don't worry. She just wants you to be happy. I turned around and still no one was there, just my reflection staring back at me. I watched her kiss me on my forehead continuously, watching her tears slowly drop onto my face and run down my cheeks. My wife was holding me even tighter than before. She knew I was about to pass away. I stood next to my bed, motionless, as I watched myself take my final breath, lying in the arms of my wife, and looking up at her, with tears running down my face, I managed to mouth the words, "I'm sorry. I love you," one last time before I closed my eyes and sank into her body. Then came this unbelievable scream, a shattering cry. It was unbearable. I couldn't watch or listen any more. My wife's world just came crashing down all around her. I just died, and now she is alone. Her screams were deafening. I couldn't imagine the pain that she was going through or what she was experiencing. It was like nothing I had ever seen or heard before. In the now, tears were streaming down the side of my face. I could feel every emotion that Kay was experiencing. I was struggling to keep it all together. I needed to leave this painful experience. Seeing my wife break down was too much for me. But no matter how hard I tried to open my eyes, I couldn't. I was forced to watch my wife go through all this pain. My inner voice was continually reassuring me that this was the only way I could be happy and pain-free. I wanted to tell her that this wasn't my fault. We have to go. We need to let your wife grieve in peace now. I was just about to turn around and leave when I noticed that Kay seemed to be having second thoughts about letting me go. She picked up her mobile phone and began to dial 111. In the now, I felt one of our two cats jump off the bed and run through their play tunnel in the hallway. I watched with bated breath as Kay placed her index finger on the call button. She was going to save my life. Instead, she paused, looked down at me, and saw for the first time that I was at peace. She kissed me on the forehead one last time, placed the phone back down on the bed, and held me tight and close. I love you far too much to save your life. I know how much pain and suffering you have had to endure throughout your life. I just want you to be happy, my beautiful baby. And now you can be with your mum. Deep down, I know this is what you want. Please forgive me, my beautiful husband, but I know you will understand why I didn't call for help. And she held me even tighter, screaming in pain. My wife selflessly sacrificed her happiness for mine, and her heart would always be empty. She would never find happiness again. In the now, I was an emotional wreck. My heart felt as if it had been split wide open. Yet I was also relieved. I started to shiver, even though it was summer. I pulled another blanket that was hanging off the bed over me and wiped away my tears. I walked around the side of the bed towards where we were both lying. I couldn't believe she sacrificed her happiness for mine, letting me go to be with my mum and find my inner peace. In doing so, I destroyed the one person who showed me any type of kindness and loved me for being me. I bent down and whispered into her ear, "I love you so much. I can't believe I was the one who got to marry someone as beautiful as you are. Thank you for letting me go." I gave her one last kiss goodbye on her forehead before I left, so she could grieve alone. Then I noticed that she had turned around in my direction, looked up at me, and touched her forehead in the exact location that I had kissed in, as if she knew I was right there and that she felt me kiss her. "We have to go right now, and I mean now." My inner voice was screaming at me to leave. I was seconds away from leaving when a strange thought popped into my head. How did my wife know the exact location where I kissed her if this hadn't happened yet? How could she feel something in the future at the same time as I observed it in the present? Unless I am observing the present and the future at the same time, but also from the perspective of the past. But I was also very aware that I was observing this reality from the now. How can I be experiencing multiple realities at different times in my life, but also at the same time and in the same location? Fuck! Am I already dead? How can I exist after death? You're just dead. Something doesn't seem to be adding up. If that's the case, that would mean there is no such thing as death when you physically die. Only consciousness exists. What the fuck? Where was this thinking coming from? Am I consciousness? Seriously, what the actual fuck is going on? Cornelius, what are we waiting for? We need to leave right fucking now. Stop thinking you can work all this out, because you can't. You're useless and stupid, remember? All you need to do is walk out of this bedroom and you will find your peace. I ignored my inner voice for the first time in my life. Why am I observing my suicide? Am I trying to show myself a way to change the inevitable? If that's the case, who the fuck is the voice in my head wanting me to commit suicide if consciousness wants me to live? That means the voice in my head, the one I believe to be me, is the one who's been creating reality in the present moment all this time. And it's not even me. So, if I am not me, who the fuck am I? That means my entire life is an illusion. We are not creating reality. Our beliefs, stories, programs, and conditions have been creating reality all this time. And our environment controls how we think and feel, which in turn creates our experiences in the present moment. The fundamental base point to who we think we are. Fuck me! The more I thought about this situation, the more it was starting to make sense. But I was still missing something. What am I missing? I was unable to take my eyes off Kate, trying to work it all out. My mind was racing and something was happening. Things were beginning to slot into place. Was I working all this out, or was I getting told this? I was so confused. Then it came to me. Whatever our level of consciousness is at the time, that's the reality we create. Our equivalent to heaven and hell experiences for ourselves and others. That means I have the choice of whether to listen to my inner voice and commit suicide, my heaven. In doing so, creating an experience of hell for my wife, as I had just observed. Or I could experience hell and in turn, heaven for my wife. It doesn't matter how I got here. What matters now is the choice I make. Suddenly, standing directly in front of me in my wardrobe mirror and staring straight back at me was someone who looked exactly like me, but wasn't me. This reflection didn't mirror any of my actions. He never moved once. I was now observing multiple realities simultaneously from the perspective of my ego. I could see a future me that also happens to be a past me who had just committed suicide lying on the bed, the consciousness me without a physical body looking directly at the ego me in the mirror, another future me standing next to my wife after I'd kissed her forehead, and the present me in the now as the observer of all simultaneous realities, lying on my wife's bed with our cats in the other room. The ego me was looking at the consciousness me, wondering what I was thinking. This is where I confronted the ego me. I decided to choose heaven for my wife and hell for myself, regardless of the consequences and the pain I would continually suffer. My wife didn't deserve an experience of hell. Instantly, everything went black.